are an avid photographer, if you are interested in wildlife photography, or if you are dreaming about making a career as a National Geographic photographer, then my video is for you. Today, on my YouTube channel, I have with me an extremely talented, world-renowned photographer, PRASENJEET Yadav. PRASENJEET Yadav is a National Geographic photographer and an explorer. Scientist by training, he has done studies in different subjects like biochemistry, biotechnology, immunology, and together he has combined his knowledge in these subjects with photography and storytelling. So this is an amazing combination, and listening to him taking the interview has really enlightened me a lot, and I am sure that this video is going to help you all if you are really interested in knowing about how to go ahead with career in wildlife photography. So let's begin. So, Prasenjit, it's lovely to have you on our show, and it really makes me very excited to know, like, your world is totally so unexplored for any common person. And I am today getting a chance to peep in your world and understand how your work is and how intense it is actually. Okay, first of all, we are basically like we have heard about wildlife photographers, we have heard about travel photographers, but what you are doing has really caught my interest is that you have put your science research knowledge plus photography and storytelling all together. You've merged all these things. So how did this click you? How has this like clicked you and has come all this way?
Yeah, to answer that question, I have to take you all the way back to where I grew up. Right now, I'm sitting in my parents' house in Nagpur, but I grew up at my father's farm, which is like 35 kilometers from Nagpur city, and it's located in the middle of a jungle. So I had a rather interesting and a different childhood. Like people go to tiger reserves to see wildlife. I just used to step out of my house. And even today we have like tigers walking and coming and in our lawn every now and then. So with that interest and because of that kind of exposure and background, uh, nature, environment, wildlife was always a part of life. I never had to jump into it. It was handed over to me. I grew up with it. And it's a kind of a it becomes your lifestyle. So when I moved out, started working, started doing academics, and moved to bigger cities, I knew that it's not something I can let go of. I can't let go of environment, nature, living in the wilderness, and the feeling of being by myself is very into the core of me. I got trained as a molecular biologist, which even now my teachers are surprised about. They were like, "We didn't think you'll pass 10th grade. How did you manage to get to NCBS?" So it came as a surprise to everyone. Started research on molecular ecology, which is an interesting stream where you use molecular tools, which is understanding the building blocks of our body, which is DNA and those molecular particles, to use those tools to understand how wildlife and ecology works. So I was using those molecular tools to understand tiger movement and their relatedness and how which parks are isolated, which parks are connected in Central India and South India. So that was part of my research, which went on for a couple of years. And I realized that I had learned the process of science, how science works, how scientists think, because I was surrounded by some of the brightest minds in the country. And I'm still in awe of them and the way they think and the way they see the world that we live in. So I think I was privileged, and I'm glad that I got the opportunity to kind of learn and understand the world from their perspective. And I started learning and I started imbibing that worldview of how to look the world from a scientific perspective. By that time, I realized that maybe I'm not built to sit in a lab for the rest of my life. So I decided to take a break, I had realized that growing up in a jungle, speaking with villagers and sitting next to bonfires, listening to some of the best of the wildlife and hunting stories, I knew that storytelling is something that was ingrained in me. Uh, and and this was also the time when I was realizing that the pure academic setup that I was in is brilliant, but not accessible. It's not accessible to the people. The tiger research and the papers I was publishing with my group in national international journals, the people who are sharing spaces with tigers can't make sense of any of those publications. Although it was cutting edge science, as we believe and as we promote it, it was not accessible to them. They could not make any sense out of it. Forget people sharing spaces with wildlife. My mother couldn't make sense of my first paper that I published. And we all know that mother puts the most interest in whatever their kids do. And if she couldn't make sense of it, I knew that there's something wrong. And that what was wrong was that the language of science is very technical, and it has to be for its own reasons. But I wanted to figure out how I can make myself useful to communicate that science to larger audiences, make it more accessible. So people start learning, understanding science and environment and wilderness. At the same time, because they're understanding, they would start caring about it as well. So I took a sabbatical from my potential PhD that was going on, and it was supposed to be a 6-month sabbatical back in 2013. Now we are in February 2021. So yeah, that's how I moved out of academics, started telling science stories, started collaborating with other scientists, colleagues that I had, who were doing groundbreaking, pretty amazing science in our country, in different places. But somehow our view of hardcore science still comes from the West, because they share it that way. They promote it that way. There is a lot of visual material associated with the science that they do, which was not the case back then in our country. So yeah, I started making myself useful to all my colleagues, and they started, over time, they started getting excited, and they were like, okay, this guy's not just going around and fooling around, taking photos of wildlife just like that. And him being a photographer doesn't mean that he does fashion or weddings. He's actually contributing to the larger scientific ecosystem in his own way, which is what I had not planned, but I saw myself doing. And yeah, that's what I've been doing for years now.
Right. I had also heard you telling about that people have a very short kind of outlook towards wildlife photography. Like for them, it's just looking at tigers or these big cats in the jungle. But you had also spoken about the wildlife that is also in your backyard. So what is it? Can you explain? Like,
yeah. I think that's an interesting question. And no offense to anyone who goes to tiger reserves to take photos of tigers. I think it's really cool. I enjoy doing that as well. But there are these parameters. There is hobby, there's passion, there's profession, and there's obsession. So we all go through that gradient. So I think I have maxed out. I'm into the obsession level now. But when you cross the passion part, when it becomes a profession, you have to figure out that you are not just going there and taking photos and be a taker. You have to figure out how you're giving back to the larger environment and ecosystem. As long as you're doing it as a hobby, it's absolutely fine. You have something else as your profession, and you clear your mind space, and you go into the wilderness and you take photos, you share it with your friends, you share it with your family. And by doing that also, you're creating awareness. People are getting more interested in wildlife, sure. And that's, I'm not demeaning that at all. So don't take me wrong. I think that's really important. It's meditative. And a lot of my closest of the friends do it. And I appreciate that. Passion is when you start figuring out a little bit that, oh, it's not just me taking photos, what else can I do? Profession is when I think I started getting more serious. So I've gone through these stages. when I made it my profession, I was like, it can't be that I'm just selling and taking wildlife photos to make my living and to pay my bills. If that's all I want to do, I mean, I could pay my bills doing something else as well. If I'm taking those photos and paying my bills, I have to also figure out that how I'm making myself useful to the subjects from which I'm making and paying my bills. So yeah, I think that's where I feel that out of every 500 or 1,000 photographers, wildlife photographers, a few graduate, few move forward to the profession level, and all of them are contributing as well. All of them are in their own way figuring out that they themselves are not just takers. And I think I'm finding myself more in that space these days where I take up really crazy projects that most of the people in the world in their sane minds wouldn't take up, wouldn't want to do, wouldn't want to live in a tiny hut somewhere at 5,000 meters at minus 20 degrees for 2 years, might not want to go on a extremely secluded island where a ship drops you and probably might come back after 30 or 40 or 50 days and you're by yourself on a tiny 7 square kilometer island. I don't think that's cross past passion. I'm accepting that I'm obsessed about it now.
Exactly.
Just to make sure that I put a reality check that people don't think that, oh, I'm also passionate. Why am I not doing crazy things? Just drawing a line, letting people know that passion is really good. Stay there.
Right. And the snow leopard research which you were doing, if I'm not wrong, was it for around like 3 years or something you were doing it?
Yeah, so just a quick correction. I wasn't doing the research. I was the communicator. There's a research organization called as Snow Leopard Trust, which is based out of Seattle. And they have a counterpart or a home organization here in India called as Nature Conservation Foundation. So these two research institutes have been doing research on snow leopards in India as well as across other 12 countries in Asia for last couple of decades. And some of the brightest minds there are very close collaborators and very close friends of mine. So we decided to work together, and I wanted to become a vessel to tell and bring their story back from these remote places and share it with the people. So that's exactly what I did. Yes, it started back in 2017. We went to Kyrgyzstan and then Mongolia, and then we started working in Ladakh and Spiti. And it was supposed to be like a 6 months project, which was partially funded by National Geographic. And then I got some photos. I went back to DC and I was sitting with my photo editor. And I started showing her and telling her that how crazy this landscape is, how difficult it is, it's interesting. And I'm working on these mountain goats, and yeah, there are snow leopards as well. And she paused. She went back. She's like, did you just say that, yes, there are snow leopards also? I was like, yeah. And then she said, I want you to go back and just photograph snow leopards now. And I was like, the most influential magazine's senior most photo editor is asking me to go and take photos of the most elusive and difficult to photograph species in the world.
There was something interesting you also had to share about. Like, again, it's connected with the uncertainty part of your job. Is that for 14 to 15 days, you had a camera placed somewhere, camera trap placed somewhere, and you had clicked two cubs, leopards, snow leopard cubs. So can you just tell this interesting story to us?
Yeah, it's not 14 to 15 days. Like, many of my camera traps ran for like 14 or 15 months. And in those 14 or 15 months, I got maybe 2 or 3 photographs.
Am I listening correct? Months?
Yeah, months. We are not talking about days. These are months we are talking about. And every week you go and you tend to those camera traps and you figure out and you try and make sure how they should keep running. So what happens is, so for the viewers, those who don't know what camera trap is, what I do is I have created these little specialized camera equipments which work on their own. So I go up at 5,000 meters in Himalayas in minus 30 degrees, and I set up kind of a studio in the middle of the rocks there. And a snow leopard or any animal that comes and triggers the wireless trigger that I've set up and takes a selfie.
Okay.
Essentially, I've just set up a selfie booth into the mountain.
Oh,
But
very interesting.
in a place where I know that these really elusive animals walk through. So they come, they take their selfies, and there are too many variables into this. Essentially, the camera has multiple angles and essentially multiple equipments that has to work simultaneously to get that one decent shot. There's a camera body which has to work. Then there are wires coming out of it. Then there are different lights, artificial lights. So there are 2 or 3 or 5 flashlights, and each of them have different role, and each of them have to work properly. And then there is a remote trigger, which is kind of an infrared beam that as soon as it gets obstructed, the camera takes a photo. And this is all pre-visualized, and I set it up knowing where the animal would walk from and at what time will it trigger the camera. So it's all thought through.
Okay.
But as you know, there are so many variables. Everything won't go right. And when it comes to animal like snow leopard, if I'm setting it up here, I would know that in a span of 30 days, the leopard might walk from here for once or maximum twice, but mostly once for those 15 to 20 seconds. So you keep the camera operating and working for 30 days, 24/7 for those 15 or 20 seconds. And as the law goes, it wouldn't work just for those 15 or 20 seconds. So that's why it took us too long. And then even if the photo comes, then there is a perspective of how the animal is standing there. Is it actually looking at the camera? Is it looking away? Is it looking dirty? Is it looking cool? Is the light proper at that point of the day when the camera took the photo, natural light? Have all the 5 flashes fired or just 3 fired so that now there is a shadow coming onto the left eye of the snow leopard? Or is the tail a little bit cut out of the frame? So there are too many things that just are something not in your control, and that's why it took us more than a couple of years to get those right photographs for the story.
Okay. So, and again, so that's why that 2.5 leopard cubs that came in the photograph.
I didn't think you'd bring it up. That picture still haunts me at night. I mean, it was so close to becoming the picture that I wanted, but I mean, it is what it is. I have to live with it for the rest of my life.
And now I'm sure many of the viewers who aspire to become photographers, especially National Geographic photographer, being that is a dream come true for anyone. So can you guide them on how to get on those lines?
It only happens in our Hindi movies that one fine day you get a letter from some Canadian photographer to go in the rainforest. It doesn't happen that way. So don't get fooled by what Hindi movies show you. Okay, the reality is very different, and everyone out there who is working for Geographic or who is actually, irrespective of Geographic, is just one of the many organizations where you can work, right? So if you are doing impactful naturalistic storytelling, every person has gone through those 4 phases that I talked about. Some people are on the 3rd, they are sane. Some people have graduated to the 4th, that is hobby, passion, profession, and obsession. So everyone out there have to go through it. So if you wanted to actually go to that level, and if you truly believe it, start building your portfolio. Don't wait for National Geographic or PRASENJEET to call you. Okay, because most probably National Geographic might not call you. You have to give them a reason so that they call you. Right. And that reason is something that you have to build over years before you get that call. So don't wait for that. Don't think that you get a call one day. Make that call happen. To make that happen, pick up your camera, find stories that you care about in your backyard. As I mentioned, you do not have to go to tiger reserve to take photos of wildlife. The ant in your backyard, the bird that flies next to your house are all wildlife. They are as wild as any other wildlife, right? So take photos of them, get better with the art of photography. That's when you start understanding how the larger photo storytelling goes. You could be a photographer or videographer. Figure out how the visual storytelling goes. There's enough. We live in the era of Google. Mm-hmm. Anything and everything you need is accessible on your fingertips. You have your phones. Just learn. There's so much material available there. So self-learn and learn as much as you can. Start building your portfolio. Start building stories. Start publishing in your local newspaper. Then go to your state newspaper. Then start publishing in national level magazines. Graduate to international level magazines. Once you do a bunch of international magazines, that's when probably is when you'll come into the eye of these bigger production houses, and they might want to work with you. So if you manage to reach till there, sooner or later you will get called by them. So don't work towards getting a call from National Geographic. Work towards how can I do this? I really like it and I want to keep doing it better and better. Right. If you do that and find a project that is your calling, that truly makes you feel about. It could be stray dogs in your locality. It could be taking photos of your garden. It could be taking photos of your mother, your partner, your girlfriend, anything. Mm-hmm. Just do that, and then time will tell if you or you just one fine day might feel like this is not for me. I feel like that even now. Okay. Even now, I feel like maybe this is it. This is the last project. I've thought about the next one. Maybe I don't want to do it. So it's a process. So go get it. I mean, there's no one who's going to help you do that. You have to help yourself do that.
Nowadays, people are like, photography is clicking anything and putting it on the social media and getting likes on them. But being useful.
Yeah, which is good. Yeah, yeah, that's a good point you mentioned about social media. Like I started Instagram back in 2013, and I was never regular on it. And till April 2020, over like 7 years, I had like 6,000 or 7,000 followers. Didn't count because I knew that irrespective of those views or not views, I'm keeping myself 300 days a year busy. Yeah. So am I a social media influencer or am I a storyteller? If today I stop posting on social media, I know my editor would still call me when there is a good story. I know I can still reach out to my editor and be like, hey, there's a good story. They don't care if I have 100 followers or 100,000 followers on Instagram or on social media. I get my work from the people, those who publish. So don't get fooled by social media at all. I think it's important, but it's not everything. Yeah, so Prasenjeet, it was really great knowing your world. And as I said earlier, getting a small peep into what you're doing, because it is a humongous job that you're doing. And we can just imagine a bit of it through what you have shared. Thank you, Rachana. Thank you so much.
Subscribe now and press the bell icon.